Can I taste your juice?
All right, so we're back. Oh wait, I forgot. Hey folks, PBusardo. You see, because I'm making these videos back to back to back. All right, so here we are on part 3 of this video. The return to Evolv 3 years later. We're gonna start this video off with a look at the stockroom. Okay, we're going to take a look at tech support. We're gonna meet some of those folks there. Then we're gonna go back to the interview and wrap this up. I promise you, there will not be a part 4. Okay, so let's get back to it.
Well, this also goes to traceability. You know, with the current regulatory environment, you know, one of the things you're going to have is traceability all the way through the system. So we've had this already, but because we've known that this was coming. But this is our stock area. This is where all the components are kept.
This is where all the components are.
Yeah.
And again, this is looking much better than the last time we saw this, right? Okay. Now, are there requirements for this room as well, as far as humidity and temperature?
No.
Okay, so these components aren't...
No, they're encapsulated components. So.
Okay. So what we see here are all of the components that go into making the Evolv boards, right? And again, they just look like movie reels, really.
Yeah. So here's your blank PCBs.
Okay.
Just like that.
How many components go into make say a DNA 75C?
75C, I think there's... Be a better question for John, but I think there's 180 some components on that
180
board.
components.
Now, some of those are duplicate components.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know how many unique components are on there, but it's quite a few. Yeah.
Quite a few.
It's under 200, over 100.
Okay. Where do most of the components come from?
Well, that'd be a better question for Katrina if she's in here.
She is in here. We get to meet Katrina. Hi.
Katrina's our office manager.
Hi, Katrina.
She also does all purchasing, so
okay.
That would be a better question for her.
What was your question?
Well, the question was, where do most of the other components come from?
Malaysia, China, that Asian
typically
countries. Yeah,
Asian countries, right?
We go through distributors, so we have large distributors like Arrow and Avnet. So we purchase through them, and then they source, and they have warehouses all over, and we order through large distributors.
Do you order based on like your orders, or do you order based on I need to have this many boards, or how does that work?
Usually about, I can't give you like a number as far, I can give you a number as to like a dollar value in there, but individual like numbers, because we use different ones cross for different things. So usually around $2 million in there at a time, $2 million.
$2 million of working inventory.
Yeah. And as far as like ordering, we usually have to order things based on the lead time of the component. So if the component has like a high lead time, we have to order certain ones more in advance than others. Some are 24 weeks, 36 weeks. Yeah, so we have to plan fairly far in advance.
You do.
And they will sit down and they'll go over our sales and our history and kind of do like an ERP system to determine what we need to have in stock, so we have it here in time before.
Interesting. So what's your component that has the longest lead time?
Probably the inductors.
The inductors. Okay, and what's the lead time on those?
Right now, I think it's 36 weeks.
36 weeks. Wow.
Well, we're in a period of allocation, so which is bad. That means we have to order more in advance.
Right.
Yeah.
So there were issues years ago, I mean, with all electronic cigarette manufacturers with screens, right? They were really hard to get screens.
Yes.
Has that gone away at this point?
Yeah, I think that was sort of at the peak of the wearable.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Things that were scraping it in that were wearable with a small screen. I think that's the reason for the lockup. It was really the glass. It wasn't the screen manufacturers. It was the glass manufacturers that were having the largest problem. Typically you're buying your screens from companies that put the whip on them, not that make the glass.
Okay.
So there aren't that many companies out there that make the glass, the actual wedged with two pieces wedged with some goo in the middle.
Right.
There aren't that many companies out there that do that, and we were buying, just like everyone else, we were buying our screens from the whip manufacturer, because they are the final manufacturer, and they just weren't able to get glass. So you'd have to order well in advance, and very large orders.
Okay.
So we still have a lot of...
Even with the orders, it didn't matter. I mean, even with the orders in advance, no one could get anything, because I think Fitbit came through and just bought everything.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. Yeah.
And so now, but we don't really see that problem anymore. I'm sure.
No, a lot popped up during that time. I think you're actually seeing the opposite now, where everybody has sort of a more than they can.
More than yeah. Now there's too many boards out there. Right?
I think they
Or
built more
screens.
factories. I think they
Probably
built
to
a
meet
couple
the
more.
demand, yeah,
Sure.
right, because it was new back then,
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so who do you work with more? Do you work more with Brandon or with John?
John.
John, what's that like?
I have worked with John for many years, so
Okay,
I've been with John for 10 years.
okay, so you're used to you're used to him.
Yeah, I like John.
You
I
like
like working with John. I think he's fun. He's energetic. I don't know. I like his style working with him because it's always unpredictable.
Oh.
I like that. Yeah.
Who's the better boss, John or Brandon?
I have to go with John. John signs my paychecks.
Oh, all right, okay, well that's easy then. That's easy then. So I'm sure it would have been Brandon if he signed the paychecks.
Maybe.
Okay, very good to meet you. Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you.
So the machine will actually punch that right out of the plastic.
It pulls it back.
It actually, separates the top tape, gets peeled back, and
Oh, okay. Neat.
Yeah, and these are like high. That's 50,000 on there. 50,000 parts on here.
50,000 parts on that
Yeah.
one reel.
On the, and this is
50,000
the value, or this is the value. So it's one mic, 0402, and it's a 16 volt. So it tells
Okay.
you, what its value there.
Do you by any chance know the most expensive component on a Evolv board?
It'd be the processor.
The processor. Okay, where are those here somewhere? So this would be like an Intel core processor on a computer, right? I mean, that's basically what it's
that's
doing.
where the program is stored, essentially. So
I don't know if we can.
yeah, we can't because it's in this
Okay, no
sealed,
worries,
so-
no worries.
humidity sealed. So
Okay, so the processor is the most expensive component on the board,
That and the
definitely.
screen.
and the screen.
Oh yeah, the screen. I forgot about the screen. Screens
Yep.
are high.
They come in bulk packaging.
Okay.
With a whip of our design. So
Okay, so the whip is yours.
whip is ours.
And for people who don't understand it, the whip is the cable that runs. Yeah. Okay.
Between the board and the glass.
Okay. There they are.
So because not every customer gets them, we keep them in shipping, depending on.
Yeah, some of our manufacturers buy their own screens
Okay.
with our whip. So we give out the plans for the whip, and they.
Am I actually needed for something?
Oh yeah, well we're
There
almost
he
done
is.
here.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see you again, my friend.
yeah.
Hey, hold on.
You don't need me on the dog.
No. Let me just take the hand off out of here and say hello to you again, and I'm sure we're going to catch up a little bit. Okay.
I'm certain.
All right. Terrific. So there's the screen. So you said some of the manufacturers don't get your screen, but I mean it's not like they can use any screen. You're
No.
still specing what kind of screen.
No, they have to
Okay.
spec the same screen we do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So who are we going to meet now?
This is Nick.
Nick.
Is,
Hey, Nick.
We've met at conventions before.
Yes. Okay.
So
So is this your domain in
this
here?
is my domain. This is my.
All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look.
It's a controlled disaster in here at all times.
Yeah, well,
so,
but that's good though.
but I handle all the support operations for from the consumer to the manufacturer. I work with our manufacturers on their new designs to give them advice or say like, hey, there's something I noticed on this, or if they're having issues with a existing device, I'll work with them on that. On top of that, I handle all of the QA and testing. I look at our returns. I look at field failures. I look at pre-manufacturing failures. And then on top of that, from any given day, I mean, I'm kind of a jack of all trades because we're a small, rapidly growing company.
Sure.
So everybody kind of does everything. Any given day, I'll be doing support, I'll be doing testing, I'll be making the sign that you saw out front when you came in. I'll be, acting as Brandon's personal assistant and helping him with stuff, working on FDA documentation.
Oh, sorry about that.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. But
So walk me through your domain here a little bit.
so this is just all my soldering station where I work, testing equipment down there. You'll see all kinds of test equipment, old workbench that I built for my garage years ago and just brought here. So when we moved to this building, it was kind of a couple months before that was when I came on board. So I made mods for a couple years before meeting these guys and started talking with Brandon and John and met them and got an offer to work here and I love it. I mean, every day I get up and I come in and I can't imagine doing something that I would enjoy more. So,
Yeah, that's terrific. It's like you're not working.
Right, I get to come in, and it is a lot of work a lot of days. A lot of people don't get to see it, but they think we just kind of sit around and vape all day. And
Oh, you don't?
not always, but
Yeah.
I do have a great time at work every day. There's a lot of it's always something challenging. It's always something new and exciting, and I get to do what I love, and I've learned so much. So
Very cool.
But I mean, a little example of what like I do. You can see I'm looking at a board under the microscope. on the, that's on my desk there.
Yeah, that one doesn't look good.
Yeah, somebody I think got it a little too hot or tried to solder it, a couple too many times. But and I see all the stuff that it comes in. I see people try to like shave the corners of boards down, or do all kinds of crazy stuff with them. So I see everything.
What's the craziest you've seen?
The craziest I've seen is like people will remove like all the buttons off the board, all the USB off the board, and they'll shave the corners down so far you can actually see that they're like cutting into the copper layers. and then they'll be like, "Why are my boards failing?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't do that.
You can't do that, right?
But yeah, we do a lot of due diligence and a lot of testing. I mean, any given day I can pull up, a document that'll show you from a certain change or a certain revision in the firmware, an entire test procedure that we run through to make sure all the protections work, make sure everything's safe, all the limits are there. I think I even have an image from when we were like testing the temperature control. So here's like a set point of 400 degrees. I mean, within 3 degrees on the test fixture is pretty dang good. By the time you factor in like the piece you're actually heating up being a little bit reflective, 3 degrees within the set point is actually very good. So
can you do me a favor?
Yes, sir.
Can you come to my house and configure my FLIR for me, because
Sure.
I cannot get that to get an accurate
If you have
read.
Brandon send me out, I'll be happy to come. Where are you at, New York?
Yeah, New York.
Oh, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's about a 5-hour drive.
Okay, I'll come out. That's
I would love that, because when temperature control was introduced, okay, I went out and spent the money on a FLIR camera. Right. And I've never been able to use it to get an accurate read.
You're having a tough time with it. We'll teach you some tips.
Because of the reflectivity and all that other jazz that goes along with. Yep. Okay.
These are ones that I think came back from like large vendors.
Okay.
We'll use them if we need like a 510, or we need a battery tray, or we need buttons, or anything like that. Other than that, interesting stuff that's on here. I mean, everything. This is just kind of an amalgamation of stuff that's on the shelf. So, about twice a year, I'll kind of get sick of all the clutter, clean it up, and then Brandon likes to clean his office out. And by cleaning his office, he likes to just put everything in a box and bring it into mine. So I'll come into work one day, and he'll be here late, and he'll put everything on my desk in a pile, and I'm like, okay, awesome, office is clean.
He's laughing.
He's in there laughing because he knows he does that. So I mean, everything down there just from my tools.
Let's take a walk.
I'll stand there and work on stuff and test things. We've got a scope here and a couple power supplies, DC load tester, a milliohm meter, a lot of different test fixtures, and like that box there sitting on the table. We've got like these, which we just cut on the laser. They're test fixtures that were built and then configured to be a certain ohm, and then we'll read them with the milliohm meter, note the resistance of them. We've also got a lot of really cool protections like people don't even know we have. Like we've got a lot of like static electricity protection and stuff like that on the board. I mean, so we'll take a mod and we'll actually shock it. If you turn the light off, you can probably see the electricity. You can stick that right in the USB port.
Yep, you can see it.
Yeah, you can see the electricity jumping right off the end of it. And it still works, no problems, no nothing.
Like if somebody has an issue with an Evolv product, with a board, whatever.
They'll talk to me.
So you're the first line. You're the guy that they would email. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll come in, put a ticket in the help desk. They'll talk to me, and then I'll give them a hand, or I'll help them troubleshoot, or I'll give them an RMA authorization and have it come in. So basically, like everything, you guys already talked to Paul outside. So everything like will come through me through the help desk, and then I'll give them an RMA. It'll come in. Paul will work on it. Paul will fix it, and then it'll go back out. And that's pretty much it. And then for our big manufacturers, they'll usually email Brandon or email me directly, and I'll work with them on issues and problems.
Okay.
And then outside of that, I mean, day-to-day stuff is just testing and looking through returns and categorizing things and collecting data.
We were just talking about this. If there was a bank of 50 of you, right, that would mean that A, you have a lot more product out there, or B, you have a lot more bad product out there, right?
People too don't have a lot of insight into how much volume we actually produce, and it's a lot of boards.
Yeah, we did well over 1 million last year.
Well over 1 million boards last year. Okay.
And that makes it
over 1 million.
Yeah, and that makes it very easy too to go online and find somebody with a specific issue, and be able to find 20 people having the same issue. I mean, even if that occurrence rate is a fraction of a percent, you know, at our production volumes, that's still 50 people, that's still 100 people.
Sure.
And it makes it easy to find somebody with an issue. But, you know, if there's one thing I can say, it's that, you know, if somebody has a legitimate issue, you know, I try to help everybody. We try to help everybody.
Of course.
We don't want anybody to have a mod that, you know, oh, I spent the money and it doesn't work, or oh, I bought an Evolv product because I believed in it and they said it was good and it didn't work. So we try to help everyone.
Okay. So, like when a support ticket comes, how do you get notified? Is there a ding? Is there an email? Does Brandley come and hit you over the head? How does that work?
It depends on the day. Some days he does kind of walk in here and he's like, "What are you doing?" You know. But yeah. Other than that, you know, I'll look through the help desk every day, and I just have like an interface I log into and I see all the tickets. We do get emails, but those are so. I mean, the folder that they're all sorted into, there's so many. It's not a good way to do it. So a ticket will come in. I'll look at the list for the day, and then I'll go through that, help each person. You know, I generally go through them about once a day, spend a couple hours, and that's it. I mean, it's just your standard run-of-the-mill like help desk interface.
Okay.
So there's nothing really fancy about it.
He issues an RMA number. That number has a code on it, a barcode on it. And when the devices come in over here, he scans it and it brings up all the information that Nick has already provided to the customer, and also the customer feedback on what they're seeing with the device. So it gives him, you know, some clues as to where to look.
Okay. And like on an average day, how many tickets do you get?
You know, I could probably even tell you that.
Okay.
Let's see. So Sunday, Monday, so new tickets 16, 22, 21, 22, 14, 13. Generally it looks like about 11 to 35
per day.
30, yeah.
Not every tech support ticket is necessarily a failure, mod failure. Sometimes it's just, you know, not knowing how to use this one thing on the device. Or
right. No, I understand that, but still, are you able to handle that kind of?
Yeah, absolutely.
No worries.
No worries.
Okay. And what's the average response time?
It really depends. I mean, if we see something come in, or I see something come in, and I know it's kind of a cut and dry, something that, you know, I've seen before and I know what it is. I mean, I can get somebody the help they need in probably 30 seconds. Okay. You know, if somebody has more of a in-depth question, or, you know, can you help me understand temp control better, or how do I need my board? How do I need my board to be set up? That can take a little bit longer. You know, especially when I ask people to get a copy of their settings file and send it in, attach it, then I look at it, review it, send it back to them. So some things do take longer than others, but it can be anywhere from 30 seconds to, we've got tickets I've got hours logged on it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Hey, no problem.
It was good meeting you. Thanks for the tour, and keep it up. Keep it up. Very cool. So that's pretty much start to finish, isn't it?
That's it.
It really is.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. DNA production, start to finish, soup to nuts, with pretty much everything that kind of goes around that. You got to see the new facility there and the changes. And let's see, we didn't see programming, but I'm not sure how exciting that would be. And now we're going to go back to the interview and finish this one up.
What's your take on heat no burn technology, IQS?
If heat not burn was going to work, the billions of dollars that the tobacco company have spent on it would have gotten them there already. That's sort of...
They've been working on this since the 70s.
Heat not burn is... didn't we actually lose a tobacco company to heat not burn in the 80s? I think it was Brown and Williamson, but I could be
I'm not
entirely
sure
wrong.
It was,
but no, it was...
got the farm on it, yeah.
Right, no, so there's... I feel like... Heat not burn, I 100% understand why the tobacco companies really want it to work. Because you're still an agricultural product, you still have the same pipeline, you still have the same shelf space, you still have the same, you know, manufacturing, you still have the same everything you have now, if it worked.
And you also may not have the opposition because it's still a taxable product. It's still a tobacco taxable product.
Right. No, if heat not burn worked and was meaningfully safer and was acceptably, you know, as good a product as a cigarette, yeah, the tobacco companies would have loved that, which is why they've literally poured billions of dollars into it. To limited success, I think, is...
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's still an agricultural product. It's
right.
not a technology product.
So I'm not optimistic that they'll get there. We know for a fact that even the ones that people will not use have far more harmful constituents than a vapor product responsibly made running at appropriate temperatures, like far more.
Yeah.
So
Say that again.
So if you look at the, what the FDA calls HPHCs, that's harmful and potentially harmful compounds, in vapor, and there have been some people who've done some studies on that and published them, and you look at the same compounds coming out of a heat not burn product, the heat not burn products have way more, we'll just call them bad
Things. Sure. Okay.
than an equivalent vapor product. Now, the heat not burn products have less of those same things than a cigarette does, but the sort of back of the envelope numbers I've seen, the best of the heat not burn products are maybe half of a cigarette. The best of the vapor products are like a 10th, a 20th of a cigarette.
Really? Okay.
Even to the degree that they have them at all. Like, there's no tar in vapor because you're just not running through that sort of a pyrolysis reaction that'll do it. So for that, it's zero. So with everything being exactly the same, a heat not burn product that's pyrolyzing tobacco will never be safer than a liquid vapor product that isn't. Now, could they get approved as appropriate for protection of public health? Yeah, I think they can, because you're comparing against a cigarette.
Yeah,
but
cigarette's always your comparator.
Until it's not.
No,
if everybody
that's true.
switches over to heat not burn, then you're comparing
you come
against heat
halfway
not
home.
burn.
I think I think the one advantage they have is a little more familiar to a smoker.
More familiar, probably similar taste. Right.
I've tried one. I've tried the QoS system. I wouldn't say it's a similar taste at all.
No.
I think unless you're talking about the smell of a freshly opened pack of cigarettes.
I mean, the advantage of heat not burn is that's Columbia House going from selling vinyl to selling CDs.
Right.
If it had stopped there, or if they'd gone to like Blu-ray CDs, that would have been wonderful for Columbia House. Any amount of money that Columbia House can put into making better records makes sense, because they don't have any inherent advantages in a digital download world. And they, even if they wanted to switch over to that, because certainly they could, the tobacco companies have enough money to dominate vapor if they wanted to, but it doesn't leverage any of the things that they're good at. It doesn't matter if they have relationships with the best tobacco growers. It doesn't matter if their tube stuffing lines are no longer useful. Their their tobacco shelf space, like if you go to a heat not burn, you're going to have little sticks of tobacco that live in a little packet thing that sit behind the counter at a convenience store.
Right.
That's not really changing a lot.
Right.
Maybe they're shorter because they don't have a filter, so you put an insert in the pack, done.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense that they would really, 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 really want heat not burn to work.
Yeah.
And they've spent a lot of money and a lot of time and have a lot of people working on it, but they've been doing that for a long time to really no results. So maybe IQOS is a fantastic breakthrough that's super different from what they were working on previously. It doesn't seem like it. If you tear apart the old stuff, it's not fundamentally different. If you look at their old patents, they're not doing anything super new with their heat not burn stuff this time around. It's a little smaller because the electronics are smaller. The batteries have gotten somewhat better, so the batteries are a little better. But I think the right vapor product could entirely change the game. I don't think you're going to find the same with the right heat not burn product.
Royal College of Physicians. Okay, 95% safer than smoking.
Okay.
What do you think about that number? Do you agree with that number?
I think it's hard to generalize to our entire category right now, given the disparity in the companies making hardware, making juice, whatever, the way people are using hardware, juice, whatever. I think that's 100% a possible number. It's even 100% possible that that's the number for whatever they were testing when they came up with that number. But in a world where I know that some of the replacement heads are being made out of lead-containing brass, and I know that lead is leaching into the vapor, and I know there are a number of juice companies knowingly using diacetyl-containing flavors, it's hard for me to say as a category we can come up with a number, because I think I don't think that that's an impossible number for the best of breed for any of our things in combination. I know that's not an accurate number for the worst of breed for any of the things going on. But I think it's 100% a number that we could get to as an industry if we either had to or if everybody putting out products cared.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think that number could actually be low in some cases, but I think it could also be high in some cases. But I think the research needs to be done, and I think it's a very difficult thing to do because people are vaping in so many different ways with so many different liquids containing so many different, flavorings and everything. But for some people, I think they say, well, it's still better than smoking, and that's good enough for them.
Yeah,
and that's fine,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
But I think there's other people, right? But I
is.
think there's other people who still want to do what we do as safely as possible.
Right.
And for those people, we need a lot more testing, a lot more research, right?
People aren't doing testing at all. Whether it's, even if you said, I'm just going to take all of my juices and test them in this one representative atomizer, that would be great compared to the zero information we get right now. So no, the problem with testing is less, people aren't testing enough. It's more people aren't testing at all, and even if they are testing, they're not sharing the results, and God knows we're doing lots of testing and not sharing our results, so I understand that. There's no commercial incentive to test right now because let's say you spend $1 million testing 100 juice SKUs, and you pull 8 of them off the market because you determined that those 8 weren't safe. Well, first off, if you publish that information, what people are going to take away is, oh man, these guys had 8 juices that I was using that were, exposing me to harm. The FDA is going to be interested in that because you're testing. And the other thing is people don't, the market hasn't responded positively saying, oh yeah, if you test, we'll buy it. We had some companies that did publish test results or were working on making only inhalation safe, and people didn't care. The other hard thing is if you test it and you find anything, it's not like you can go to the New York Times and be like, hey, I tested one of my juices and I pulled it off the market because it wasn't safe. Look how responsible I am, because the New York Times is going to run with a story that says e-cigarette manufacturer not safe.
Admits to safety
harming
issues.
People.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, we as an industry to survive really need to do a lot of testing. But the problem is, if the consumers aren't going to buy only juices that are tested, if the consumers don't care, then there's not a commercial reason to do it. And I mean, we all know the price of juice is in free fall, so it's not like the juice companies, even if they were running around with rented Ferraris at the shows 3-4 years ago, they don't have that kind of free money floating around right now to test just because they got $1 million wild hair to, gee, I wonder what's in this.
And John, with it, he did a talk for National Academy of Sciences. And one of the things he talked about, because a lot of times we fall back on the academic literature, so we fall back on studies that have been done. The problem is so many of those studies are flawed because they're device specific, juice specific, and they want to characterize the entire category using, this device.
We tested this juice in the CE4 and got a result one way or the other.
Right. But it's just not.
There's no commercial incentive to test your stuff and publish the results right now. I wish there was. I wish the fashions in vaping was, well, until we've seen your crash test results, we're not going to buy your car, or we're not going to insure your car, or whatever. But because it's not unknowable. It's just there's no business case to do the testing, just because we would like to know. There's nobody in a PMTA one-way world, there's nobody forcing you to do the testing. There's a huge free rider effect where, if I'm a juice company and I spend $1 million, which I throw around like it's not a big deal, but one, that's a super big deal, and two, that's a super real number. Right. Testing a bunch of juices, the guy who didn't do it, one, has $1 million to spend on advertising that I don't, and two, if I come up with all my juices are safe, he's going to say, yeah, they tested juices. All juices are safe. Even my arsenic flavored juice that I wasn't thinking was going to be safe, sounds pretty good now because 100% of juices tested were safe. So there's a huge free rider effect there, which really prevents anybody from spending, company ruining amounts of money testing stuff. We're testing some stuff, but we're doing it, part of that is, we have an NIH grant to do reference e-cigarettes. So that's a very small grant, but it's pushing us that direction. Part of it, a lot of that is because eventually we're going to have to go through PMTA or something very similar to PMTA. We're going to need this information to do that. So we're trying to, work in a very, forward kind of approach. But at the same time, it's not like we're releasing those results either. So,
do you run the risk of having bad test data that could potentially hurt sales and alienate
Absolutely.
part of the community?
I think anytime you're testing, you run that risk. And I think if you're not super committed to the project, you're probably better off not knowing, because even just saying things, we've made people all sorts of hopping mad. There's a gradient of risk to all behaviors. So maybe there are things not the safest in the world. Maybe it's still safer than a cigarette. Maybe they're actually worse than a cigarette.
Hypothetical for you. So obviously you're involved with research and you're doing testing. Let's say you come up with something that is a real red flag.
Yep.
Right? That is potentially dangerous to vapors. Do you release the information at that point, or do you save it for yourself?
Now, is this something with my product, or is this categorical risk?
Categorical risk.
Okay, so my product's easy. I just pull the product.
Right.
Personally, yeah, I would go public with it, but I really want to make sure that.
Oh yeah, of course, right.
I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Right. Well, it's not even that. You don't want to be the guy that's like, oh well, I was doing some sloppy ass science on a Friday, and turns out that because there's been a lot of that, and some of it's even really easy to refute. Like there's one study that found like 114 things nobody had ever seen before in e-cigarette vapor, blah blah blah. Yeah, and I can tell you exactly why, because their method is garbage. You were using thermal desorption tubes, and to get what's purportedly coming out of the cigarette back out, we're holding them at 400 degrees for half an hour. We're not at 400 degrees for a second in there, so I can't imagine that it's causing additional chemistry. But if you were going to do some sort of there's a categorical risk and we're just done with vaping because we can't fix it, you'd want to make very sure that you're right. But no, if we were right, and Brandon and I have talked about this, we would do it, but we're one of the very few that could. Because between Brandon and I, we own all of Evolv and we answer to nobody.
Right.
We don't have any outstanding debt.
We have no overlords.
Right, exactly. Whereas like if Blue came up with that, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to be able to say anything. It's like if you go to the FDA panel for battery safety, which I think is webcast somewhere, and go on my panel after my group's presentations. I'm sitting next to Ramon Alarcon, who's sort of my counterpart at Blue, who designed some stuff, and he's obviously not allowed to say certain things, and he's obviously not allowed to do certain things because his lawyer owners don't want him doing this research and don't want him testing these things and don't want him adding these things.
Right.
And you can just see the palpable frustration on his face, but I guarantee if they found a result that was adverse, he wouldn't be allowed to go public with it.
Interesting.
Whereas we could, and I think we would, but we would really want to make sure that you're not just adding noise before you did it.
Right.
With the testing and the research that you guys have done to this point, what would you say is the most eye-raising thing that you found?
I mean, for me personally, that was that sort of hockey stick that we see, over a certain temperature, where everything
super
just
low,
almost
and then it just
non-detectable,
takes off.
and then just straight up.
Well, it's not straight up, but
well,
it goes from being
A hockey
hundredth of a cigarette to
That
twice
way.
a cigarette over a span of about 100 degrees.
Right.
That was
surprising.
yeah. So it's
So the issue is with overheating liquid.
yeah. Well, if what you're worried about is formaldehyde, that's a pure function of temperature, but it's not a linear function of temperature. There's a working range that you need to stay in, and if you're above it, it's
Yeah, it sort of shoots up.
Right, I think I even shared that. In a
yeah. A lot of the testing that we need to do is just not sexy, but it's super needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's super expensive to do, but it's just not sexy.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to me from your busy schedules. But I would like to wrap it up by asking both of you, what do you see as, and good or bad, what do you see as the future of vaping, number one, and what do you see as the future of Evolv, number 2? So, who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I'm biased, you know, and I've seen some things that we're doing, but I also hope, as a category, as a market, that we walk a little bit back to where we were with trying to convert smokers, because I don't want to see this turn into a static market where it's, you know, we're losing people through attrition. You know, people are quitting vaping, they quit smoking, now they're quitting vaping, and that group keeps getting smaller and smaller. So my hope is that, you know, we walk back that direction. So if I had a wish, from a technological standpoint, at least on the device side, I've seen some of that, and you know, I'm excited about it.
I think eventually vaping ends smoking. If I didn't believe that, I would have gotten out of it already. I don't think it does it with the products as they exist right now. I think to a certain degree, the regulations will figure themselves out to the point where they're actually helping. Like, the only healthy vaping market right now is Europe, because they came out with some amount of regs, whether or not those regs are clever or well considered or whatever, and some of them are and some of them aren't. Like, I don't know why a 2 milliliter tank is inherently safer than anything else.
Or 10 ml bottle, right?
right. Put a childproof cap. I feel like you could have solved those problems other ways, but you know, but it does give a certain amount of certainty, which we don't have here right now. But I think eventually we end up with products that are better than cigarettes while being cost competitive, or cheaper than cigarettes while being demonstrably, provably safer than cigarettes. I think, of course, I'm a true believer, but I think, you know, by 20, I thought it would be by 2020, but I think it's pushing out, because I feel like this industry has sort of spun its wheels for a couple of years. I think by 2030 cigarettes are still done. Like, other than as movie props in Mad Men, the Netflix remake, because I think eventually we can do what we did to digital cameras with them, where there aren't film cameras anymore because the digital cameras are better, they're more convenient, you can take a whole lot more pictures, they're cheaper, they're in a bajillion form factors, and there's no reason, even as a hipster, to buy a film camera, though I guess Polaroid came back. I think eventually we get there. I don't think the products will look exactly like they look now, but I think they're likely to be in a form factor not distinct from something that's been out there. I think the pod mods are closer than the Cigalikes. The Cigalikes would have been a wonderful form factor if they had enough battery and they had enough juice, but they don't. There are certain just hard and fast limitations on what we're doing if we're trying to be an accurate cigarette simulant. We're not going to be cigarette-sized batteries, because if the batteries existed to do that, you'd sell them to electric cars and they trickle down to cigarettes 20 years later, or cell phones or something else that's sort of expensive and whatnot. I think the solution will have a liquid system rather than a pre-absorbed system. I really believe that an open system beats a closed system if you can get over the regulatory hurdles, at least from a end user perspective, because then you don't have to say, well, I like this pod in this juice, but they don't sell that combination, so blah blah blah.
Right.
I'll have to compromise. I think eventually we get to a space where the regulators know enough and the industry knows enough that we can do things like crash safety, where you say, okay, I'll look this up, this is 5-star rated for that, and the safety can actually improve in a synergistic way. Like, I'm happy to crash a car now into a wall that's brand new and I can look up the safety tests on. Give me a 57 Chevy and tell me to crash into a wall, and I'm just going to politely decline. Because they have genuinely improved in car safety through that sort of feedback loop of, we test it, we stamp it as safe, we improve that sort of thing. I think we could get there, working with the regulators, rather than saying, well, the FDA are the enemy because they're trying to take my 57 Chevy away and I just want those tail fins coming through my head. So I think eventually we get there where we have demonstrably safer products that are better than cigarettes, and I think cigarettes end at that point. Now, how many players are left? I don't know. Is this, are we all just sort of doing advanced R&D for the tobacco companies who will swoop in? Yeah, maybe, but the mission isn't end RJR. The mission is end cigarettes. And if RJR can make more money ending cigarettes, I'm sure they'll do it too. But no, I think there are certain things like you're going to have a certain amount of volume. You're going to have some sort of a tank holding liquid, unless somebody comes out with like a cool wax or whatever. But certain things like that won't change. You're going to have some electronics because MechMod's never going to be safe. I think it gets more sophisticated. But I think it gets more sophisticated, like the traction control in your car, where you've got an on-off button, and it's doing a whole bunch of calculations and sensors and all the rest of that, and you don't have to care. You just know that now you can stomp on your brakes and drive like an idiot, and the car handles it rather than you go spinning off into a ditch.
Right.
So yeah, I think they become more sophisticated. I think eventually the sophistication enables a simpler user experience rather than a more complicated one.
So the future of vaping is kind of like, maybe not what we're seeing today, but we still want to, eliminate cigarettes, and you still think it's going to be around in some form, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think so.
Right?
I don't think it just, sort of disappears like pet rocks or
right,
things like that. But no, the goal is develop the products that'll get us on the path towards getting we've solved the e-cigarette, and we've proven that we've solved the e-cigarette, and a PMTA is part of that, because then the FDA thinks that this is safe enough to be on the market. And if we can't say that, then we certainly can't say that we've solved the cigarette. And then grow it till then, and if somebody wants to come buy us for a bunch of shiny nickels after we've got a PMTA, we won't have any more work to do. I'll go work on robots, or Brendan will go work on fishing on the beach or whatever. but yeah, no, our goal is, get the work done, get the products out, get the data collected, demonstrate what we have to demonstrate, and
So this product or series of products that you're trying to put through PMTA, I'm going to run out of battery space again, but I just want to keep talking. Don't worry, I have one charging. So it sounds like it is an open system.
It's a refillable system.
It's a refillable system. Refillable system, okay. Is it very different from what we see today, or is it just kind of different?
In what way?
Well, I don't know.
Does it look different? No.
You're saying, does it use lasers and microwaves and quantum tunneling and AI? No, doesn't use.
I wasn't going to go with the quantum tunneling, but thank you for throwing that in there.
But no, so you say, if you look at it, would you say, I'm pretty sure that's an e-cigarette? Yeah. Recognizably an e-cigarette. Obviously, with what I've said so far, it's not 510 based. So no, they'll be recognizably e-cigarettes.
I can tell you, as someone who's been using the bits and pieces of the technology coming through, who is a vapor and who vapes all the time, all day long, every day, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to
I vape in
that
2 different ways. I mean, I vape very much.
Okay, so that's
direct lung,
but if you weren't excited, we would have gone in a different
direction.
Yeah,
I tend to be the.
If we can't sell you on this is an improvement, we drop it. That's sort of our first threshold. Is, does Brandon like it?
Do I like it?
If Brandon doesn't, you're like, well, that seemed like a good idea to me, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've piqued a lot of people's curiosity. I know you've piqued mine. Maybe I'll get to see some of this stuff while I'm here. So guys, thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me back here to see the changes.
It's definitely, we're doing the same stuff, we're just doing it bigger. Faster, and in a
I like your ballroom too. What are you going to do in there?
At first we were going to do a lab, then
I moved the labs.
Then he moved the lab to Pittsburgh.
For those of you who are watching, I tried my best to get as much as I could, but you saw the results. So anyway, guys, thank you very much.
You're still filming.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Continued success. I wish you guys nothing but the best in the future, and please keep me in the loop when the loop is available to be shared. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
And that is it, my friends. I hope you found the look into the world of Evolv fascinating or interesting. I appreciate you guys sticking around for so long, and I certainly appreciate Evolv for having me back out there to tour and to film and to share all of it with you. So that's it. That's the end. As always, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.
Can I taste your juice?